Welcome to the debate. And for this special edition, welcome to Vox Orthodoxa. Today we're not wading in the shallows. We're diving into the deep end of the spiritual pool. We're cracking open this 6th volume of the Philokalia, focusing specifically on the firebrand mystic of the 11th century, Saint Symeon the New Theologian, and his disciple Niketas Stethatos.
And when you say deep end, you are not kidding. These aren't texts for a casual Sunday read with coffee. They seem to demand a total reconstruction of human consciousness. I've been reading through it, and honestly, it feels a bit like staring directly into the sun.
Precisely. And the question we're wrestling with today is, I think, an urgent one. We live in an era of burnout, chronic anxiety, a profound crisis of purpose. The central question for our debate is this: can the intense, mystical asceticism of these 11th century monks actually provide a practical cure for us today? Or is it a medicine that's just too strong for the modern constitution?
That is exactly my hesitation. I mean, St. Symeon's brilliance is undeniable. The man writes with fire, but he represents this radical call to a conscious experience of God that involves, tears, visions, intense withdrawal. So I'm approaching this from the perspective of the weary modern citizen. I look at this text and I have to ask, are these demands for rivers of tears and uncreated light achievable or even healthy for someone with a 9-to-5, kids, a mortgage?
I understand the skepticism. It's easy to read these texts as an impossible standard, almost designed to make you feel inadequate. But I take the position that St. Symeon's radicalism is exactly what makes him the necessary antidote. His core message, ringing through every page, is that Christianity is not an intellectual theory or a moral code. It has to be a lived experience. He's fighting against a dead formal religion. He argues that if you don't feel the Spirit, if you aren't conscious of grace within you, you're spiritually asleep.
Asleep is a charitable way to put it. Symeon is incredibly harsh on this. He effectively says that if you haven't seen the light, you don't know God at all.
Because for him, God is light. He posits that we must experience the divine light and the warmth in the heart. I mean, he's very direct about the conscious sensation of grace. My argument is that modern anxiety stems precisely from our disconnect from this vital source. We are numb, distracted. We try to fill that void with scrolling, shopping, noise. Symeon offers a path to inner peace not by numbing us further, but by healing the sensory organs of the soul.
I appreciate the diagnosis, and I think most people listening would agree with the symptoms, the numbness, the distraction. But I fundamentally challenge the prescription. I acknowledge the poetic beauty of these texts, but I struggle with the accessibility. When I read their instructions, I see commands for fleeing the world, hating the self, and weeping daily. For a modern person already suffering from stress, from low self-esteem, being told you're spiritually dead unless you're sobbing on your kitchen floor might just induce more anxiety, not less. I mean, is this really healing, or is it just an impossible standard that creates a new kind of religious neurosis for anyone outside a monastery?
You're framing the methodology as the burden, whereas I see it as the release. But let's not stay in the abstract. Let's look at the specific mechanisms they propose.
Let's do that. Because the biggest hurdle I have with St. Symeon, and I think a lot of people will share this, is this insistence on feeling.
The necessity of sensory perception in the spirit, yes.
Right. In our modern context, we're often warned against emotionalism. Feelings are fickle. Faith should be steady even when you feel dry. But Symeon seems to be doubling down on the emotional experience. Isn't there a severe danger in seeking these spiritual highs? It sounds like we're being asked to chase a feeling rather than build a stable character.
I think that objection misses the mark a bit because it conflates emotion with perception. Symeon isn't talking about emotions in the psychological sense, like feeling happy or sad. He's talking about vision. He uses this powerful analogy in the text that I think clarifies the distinction beautifully.
You mean the dark house analogy?
Yes. Imagine a man locked inside a totally dark house. He's lived there so long, he's forgotten what light even is. Suddenly, a flash of lightning strikes outside, and for a split second,
Brilliant light floods through a crack in the window. The man is so overwhelmed he instinctively closes his eyes and retreats into himself.
It's a vivid image for sure. Captures the shock of it.
It is, and it's crucial. Symeon argues this is the experience of the Holy Spirit. It's not an emotion you conjure up. It's an awakening to a presence that is objectively there. The text describes the Holy Spirit as light, life, and peace. If you're in a dark room and someone turns on a floodlight, you don't just believe in the light, you experience it. Symeon is asking, why settle for believing in the concept of light when you can open the window?
Okay, but this is where I worry about delusion, or what the texts call plani. The description of this three-sunned light, it's very specific, very visual. In a world full of mental health complexities, how does a regular person distinguish between a genuine spiritual experience and, well, just imagination, or worse, a hallucination? If I'm sitting in my apartment and start seeing lights, my first call is to a neurologist, not a priest.
That is a fair and responsible concern, and to be clear, these monks were also very aware of this. Niketas Stethatos, Symeon's disciple, he addresses this head-on. He writes that true vision is always, without exception, accompanied by very specific fruits, humility and love.
So the test isn't the intensity of the light, but the result in the person?
Exactly. That is the litmus test. If a vision or a feeling makes you proud, or makes you think you're special, or judgmental of others, it is false. It's plain Jane. It's the ego dressing itself up in religious clothes. But if the experience leads to a profound sense of one's own smallness and a surge of love for others, even your enemies, it is of the Spirit. It's not about the light show. It's about the transformation of character.
So the safety mechanism is humility. If the light doesn't burn away your arrogance, it's not the true light.
Precisely. The light reveals the dust in the room. If you see the light but don't see the dust, you aren't seeing clearly.
That brings us to the mechanism of cleaning that dust, which I think this is the most controversial part for modern readers. We have to talk about the tears.
The tears. Penthos.
Yes, penthos, mourning.
It's central to their theology. You can't read 10 pages without running into it.
And this is a tough sell. You know that modern therapy generally tries to cure sadness. We have a whole pharmaceutical industry dedicated to stopping people from feeling depressed. We treat sadness as a malfunction. And yet here is Niketas Stethatos prescribing weeping as a cure. He calls tears the detergent of the soul. To a modern ear, this sounds like we're glorifying depression.
I see why you'd frame it that way. But there's a crucial distinction in the text between worldly sorrow, which leads to death, that's despair, the feeling that nothing matters, and godly sorrow, which leads to life. Niketas actually gets into the physiology of it in a way that's pretty unique. He says there are two natural flows in the human body: seed, which leads to biological life, and tears, which lead to spiritual life.
Huh. That's a fascinating parallel. But surely it's metaphorical. I mean, how does weeping actually help the guy with the mortgage and the stress ulcer?
Because the text claims that joy springs from tears. This is the paradox of Surmis, joyful mourning. Think about the tension of modern life, the constant holding it together, the professional mask we all wear. That creates immense internal pressure. It calcifies the heart.
It's exhausting. We spend half our energy just maintaining the facade that we're okay.
Exactly. Symeon and Niketas are arguing that weeping is the release valve. It's not a depression. It's the breaking of the dam. When you weep in this spiritual sense, tears of repentance, tears of longing, you are admitting you aren't in control. You are washing away the rust of anxiety. It's that feeling after a really good cry where you feel surprisingly light.
So you're viewing it as a catharsis?
It is more than catharsis. It's a reset. This is the ultimate stress relief, letting go of the illusion of control. When Niketas speaks of joy-making mourning, he's describing a state where you're so unburdened by your own ego that you feel light. It's the difference between crying because you're hopeless and crying because you're finally home and can stop fighting.
Okay, I can see the psychological validity in the release. There's relief in realizing you don't have to carry the world. But let's look at the context. These men were monks. They had silence.
They didn't have smartphones pinging them every 30 seconds.
That's true. Their environment was optimized.
The text praises solitude. It talks about fleeing the world. So how does a person in a loud apartment complex working in a cubicle, how do they apply this? If the instruction is flee the world, does that mean quit your job and move to the desert? Because if so, this book is useless to 99% of us.
That's the common interpretation, but I'd argue it's incorrect, based on St. Symeon's own concessions in the text. He's actually quite radical on this point. He says explicitly, it is not the place that saves, but the disposition.
Is that really in there? He seems very fond of his monastery walls.
It is. Symeon says he knows people living in cities, with families and heavy responsibilities, who achieved high spirituality, and, conversely, monks in desert caves who were completely lost and full of pride.
Okay, that's a vital distinction. So the geography doesn't matter.
No, he talks about the internal desert. You can create a monastery within your own heart amidst the noise. The cell is the heart. And this is where it gets incredibly practical for the modern worker. Symeon discusses the concept of carelessness, or ameriminia.
Now wait, carelessness gets you fired. If I tell my boss I'm practicing carelessness, I'm going to be unemployed by lunch.
Right, but we have to define the term. He's not talking about laziness or negligence. He's talking about the absence of meriminia, which is the Greek word for anxiety or fragmented worry. The instruction is to work without the worry that eats the soul. Do your job, fulfill your duties, but detach your identity from the outcome.
So it's working without the constant mental churn.
Exactly. You are working, but internally you are in your cell. You aren't letting the stress of the quarterly report colonize her heart. You do the work, you offer it up, and you remain at peace regardless of the result.
That sounds a lot like mindfulness, but with a theological engine driving it.
It's deeper. Mindfulness is often about watching the traffic of your thoughts go by. This is realizing you don't belong to the traffic at all. It's fleeing inside. You shut the door of your senses not to ignore the world, but to keep the world from running your internal state.
A portable sanctuary, I can buy that. But there's another barrier here, and it might be the hardest one. The text focuses so heavily on being the worst of all.
Yes, deep humility.
It demands a level of humility that feels crushing. I am the reason for the world's problems. In a culture that struggles with imposter syndrome and self-loathing, isn't this dangerous advice? We spend so much time telling people you are enough, and here comes St. Symeon saying, actually, you're nothing. How is that an antidote to anxiety? It sounds like fuel for it.
I'm not convinced, because I think it misinterprets the Orthodox definition of humility. In the text, humility isn't self-hatred, it is reality. Anxiety at its core often comes from trying to be God, trying to control outcomes, control what people think of us, secure our future. That's a crushing burden because we aren't designed to carry it.
So you're saying humility is just admitting you aren't the CEO of the universe?
Exactly. The text describes the soul finding rest only when it stops judging others and stops competing. Think about the modern performance trap. We are constantly curating our lives for social media, constantly trying to prove we're worthy. We're terrified of being less than.
It is exhausting. It's a 24/7 job just to maintain the image.
And St. Symeon offers an out. He says, where there is humility, there is the presence of the Spirit. If you genuinely believe you are lower than all, you stop competing. You stop defending your image. You become unoffendable. And in that state, anxiety just evaporates. You aren't worried about falling because you're already on the ground.
That's a compelling point. The idea that lowering yourself removes the pressure to perform. It counters the rat race. If I'm not trying to be the best, I don't have to fear failure.
And that freedom allows you to actually love people.
Okay, one last thing though. The text speaks often of the fear of God.
Yes, it does.
Modern psychology tells us fear is the root of trauma, of stress. We're trying to reduce fear. If the goal is peace, why introduce fear? Isn't that the opposite of peace?
This requires us to look at the nuance in Niketas' writing. He distinguishes two types of fear. There's childish fear, or the fear of a slave. That's anxiety, fear of punishment. That's the fear you're talking about.
And the text says to move past that?
Yes, the goal is to move to mature fear, which is the fear of a lover. It's awe. It's the feeling you get standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. You're terrified, but not because it's going to hit you. You're terrified because it's so big, so beautiful, and you are so small in comparison.
So it's a sense of scale.
It's scale and it's value. The text says, perfect love casts out fear, meaning the first kind, the slave fear. And here's the closing argument for the anxiety cure. Possessing the treasure of the spirit inside makes external losses, well, irrelevant.
Right. If you have the three-sunned light inside, losing your bonus isn't fatal.
Exactly. It destroys the root of modern anxiety, which is the fear of losing worldly things. If your treasure is internal, the stock market can crash, you can lose your job, and you are still rich. That is the ultimate security.
I have to admit, when you frame it that way, it does sound more robust than just positive thinking. This approach says, it doesn't matter if it goes well or not because I have something that cannot be taken away.
It's the opposite of positive thinking. It's reality thinking, an anchor in a storm.
So where do we land? We have an 11th century text full of extreme language.
Is it? And a first-century world full of extreme noise.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing the bridge. I still struggle with the weeping daily. I think for many people that will remain a stumbling block. It feels alien. But the core psychology, the idea that we are sick because we're disconnected from our own heart, and the cure isn't more distraction but a radical turn inward, that holds up. I'm still skeptical about whether I can do it on the subway, but the diagnosis seems accurate.
It does. And while the language is ancient and demanding, the invitation is open. St. Symeon insists this light isn't for an elite few. It's available to everyone, everywhere, if they're willing to clean the mirror of the heart.
Joyful weeping. I can admit that offers a release that modern Stoicism just doesn't. We're told to suck it up. Symeon says let it out and find God in the release.
And that is the beauty of Vox Orthodoxa. It challenges us to stop theorizing about peace and actually go do the work to find it.
Even if the water is salty with tears?
Especially then, because as Niketas says, those tears wash the eyes so we can finally see the light.
A profound, if difficult, prescription.
Indeed. Thanks for watching until the end. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it. It helps me out a lot. If you're new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell to be notified when I post next time. See you soon.